Hello puppies, welcome back to a Barking Dog Studio video. This is Christian. Today we're going to be painting up a Minotaur Demon Lord. More specifically, we're going to be going over his flesh, his fur. I don't know, would he be covered in fur or would it be skin tone? I don't know. Either way, we've got a color for that. We've also got his armor, his loincloth, some armor trim. I think you're going to get to see me paint up some of his glaive in this video. Please forgive the grainy quality of the beginning of the video. The video quality does get better. In this portion of the video, I was still new with this camera. I was still kind of learning the camera and learning the lighting required for it. It's a much nicer camera than the previous camera I had been using, which was just a webcam. This is an actual camera. But as I discovered through shooting a few videos with it and then editing them together for this one and then for a couple of other videos that will be forthcoming from Barking Dog Studio, I learned that what I really needed was a camcorder, and so I'm going to be purchasing a camcorder soon, so the video quality will hopefully even get better than what you will see later on. Now for the base tone, what I showed you earlier was from the model air color line from Vallejo. It was dark brown from the Rust color collection, and then for the mid-tone I'm going with just simple Rust, and then for the highlight I used light Rust, which were the two bottles that I just shown a second ago. The model was originally primed in some red hues. I used red, and I think I might have thrown in a little bit of yellow, mixed a little bit of yellow with it to bring out some highlight. Then I based it from the bottom up, spraying from his feet up towards the upper part of him with the dark brown. And then here what you see me doing is making the transition, where I mixed in a little bit of the dark brown with the Rust for a smooth transition into the Rust, and then at a slightly higher angle I end up coming back later with just some straight Rust. This video has been very interesting. I've had to edit it 3 different times because I kept finding errors. Some of it was during the initial couple of editing attempts. I was having buffering issues with the program, and I looked into it, and it was actually a memory issue with the computer. I haven't quite gotten it all sorted out yet. I did move a bunch of video over to another hard drive, an external hard drive, but I don't know that that helped as much as I was hoping it would have. Okay, so there I'm applying the dark brown. I had to turn him around to get some odd angles to get up under some of the armor in some areas. Sorry about being off camera, guys. Okay, so now we're ready to start bringing some of those tones up. And here I've already hit it with the Rust and made kind of the smoother transition that I spoke of a moment ago. And now I'm coming back in with just this straight light Rust, trying to give some highlights, get those ab muscles to poke out. The ones where it makes sense that light would, be reflecting, because he's got a lot of upper mass there that would still be creating a lot of shadow. Some of his lower ab muscles there kind of stick out. We want to highlight those. We want him looking strong, looking like he could whoop up on some PCs if need be. And of course, there'll be a need. He's a demon lord after all. While the video quality here is a little less grainy than what you saw previously, it gets better once I transition back to the desktop. The grainy quality was a result of lighting and not the quality of the camera that I was using. Excuse me. And there, he looks a little yellow. You can kind of see it here too. I say yellow, it's actually kind of an orange. You can see there I was attempting something with the glaive to give it kind of a glowing, hot effect, but I ended up scrapping that idea in exchange for making it look a little gory. Now here I'm mixing up a wash. I'm using, say, 60% flesh wash, and then I threw in a little bit of red tone, both from the Army Painter line. I'm going to mix them up. Again, I'm using a cup instead of pouring it straight onto my wet palette, which you see there in the background on the other side of my hands, because a lot of washes and inks will tend to bleed through the parchment paper. Now, what I did off camera here, what I didn't film, was after I got done priming him and getting the highlights I wanted, I sprayed him down with a gloss varnish, and that will help this wash settle into the recesses and not sit so predominantly on the high spots, while still giving him an overall kind of red hue and taking some of that orange highlight and knocking it back down into the red part of the spectrum, which is what I was wanting. It was the look I was going for his fleshy bits. And I've got the footage sped up here a little bit. You see I'm being pretty liberal with it. And anytime I get glob of it, or I feel it's pooling up too much in one area, I'll just tab some of the wash on the brush off onto a paper towel, and then come back to that area where it's pooled up at and hit it with the drier bristles on the brush, and the brush will just soak up that excess wash, and then I can apply it elsewhere on the miniature. It's a good way to deal with excess pooling. There you see me doing a little bit of it real quick. I'm just picking out a couple places where I felt it pooled up a little too much. Now, for a lot of the colors on this guy, I kind of had the base skin tones that I wanted to use, and for his fur later on, you'll see I used some really dark gray. It's actually a black gray from the Model Color Vallejo line. Eventually, I'm going to hit that with a mid gray, and then probably highlight with a white. But I was really just kind of letting this model speak to me, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. Once I had the flesh and the hair kind of worked out, I was just kind of letting the model dictate the next move. And if you notice there, his loincloth is purple. I felt purple was a very regal color, and he is a Minotaur demon lord after all. And I'm going with one of my favorite metal colors for the bulk of his armor, and that is from the Model Color Vallejo line, bronze. Again, we've got some boots of speed or some haste magic going on here. Got the video footage sped up. You can see I also threw on a bone color there on his horns and spikes in his teeth. And if you look closely, you can see that his eyes are red. I've also painted some irises there. They're black. He's looking forward. They're not super detectable. But his eyes are kind of small compared to the rest of his features. They're just kind of buried in his face there. Because he's got this very ferocious look. You can see on his abdomen where the transitions and the wash really bring out the detail in his musculature, his muscles. Oh, something else I did off camera was his hooves. I went ahead and threw another model color on his hooves. I used the black brown in the camo line of model color from Vallejo. Trying to get all those little finicky bits of his armor there, all the under, don't want to leave any place left unpainted. Sorry about being off camera for a moment. Now eventually I decided that was just too much bronze, and I used the same purple, which was again Vallejo. It was from the game Air line. I used some purple tones in the loincloth. I used those same purple tones to come back and trim his armor, or paint some of the trim on his armor, because as much as I like that bronze color, it was just too much. It needed a little pizzazz. Because everybody likes pizzazz, even Minotaur demon lords. Alright, we're about to finish up the armor. Well, the bronze part of the armor painting anyway. Excuse me. I believe what I'm working on here is going to be the shaft of his glaive. Yeah, we got some secret weapon copper fixtures. And there we go. Look how nice that turned out. Thinking about going back and hitting those studs. I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to go hit those studs on the shaft of his glaive with probably a steel color. And here we go. We're getting into the purple part of his armor. Now, lucky for me, the lines for the trim were already there. So it could very well be when they sculpted this, they intended for it to be a different color. But you know, with purple, because I feel purple is a regal color, and I wanted him to have some, oh, I don't know, something that symbolizes he is a lord, other than his just big hulking size and kind of commanding presence. I think the purple help kind of brings that across. I don't know what I'm going to do with his horns yet. I've got them based as just a kind of a bone color right now. I was originally going to make them two-tone. I still might do that. But I have seen some pretty good versions of this guy online where his horns weren't two-tone. They were just one color and obviously hit with some kind of a wash. I don't know. We'll see what he says when I get to painting that part of him. So there, the colors I've used are on his trim, and I'm going back with the highlight now, but the base was hexed lichen, and then for the highlight I used alien purple, and that's from the game airline of Vallejo. And I actually mixed the two together to get kind of a mid-tone, because the hex lichen is actually a very, very deep purple, almost black, and then the alien purple is very, very light purple, kind of leaning towards what some might even refer to as a lavender. And there on his glaive you can see where I painted that top section beneath the blade, kind of a bone color. I'm going to go back in and hit it with a wash, and I might add another color to it somewhere, but for the most part that part's actually done. And then if you look at his skull down there at the bottom, I painted it the same paint that I used for the blade part of his glaive. The skull and blade are painted with model color steel, and eventually I'm going to be highlighting them up with some other metallic colors, and then I'm going to add some gore to them. I thought it'd be cool to add some gore to the glaive to make it look like he cut somebody, but then some down there on the skull that looked like he used that end of it to maybe bash somebody with. And so he has these coins or these medallions hanging off his armor in places. Originally I'd painted them bronze also, but again I decided there was just too much bronze, and so I'm going back there and I'm coating it initially in steel just to get away from the bronze color, but I actually plan on going back later on and hitting it with a silver. The medallions, I'm going to bring them up to a silver, but just to get it shifted over from the bronze I'm using a steel color. If you notice there at his hooves, there's part of the model that extends downward because it's meant to slot into a base. Well, I've masked that part of the miniature off with silly putty, and then over on the base I've rolled silly putty up into a couple of small bowls and put them down in the female or the whole part of the excuse me, slots for the base. The purpose of doing that is that you get a better bond with glue when you're going straight from the material to material, whereas if you paint over it and then you have paint in the base as well, you're really just gluing the paint and your bond's not going to be as good or as strong. And I want a good permanent bond when I go to glue him down to his base. So I mask off both sides. I mask off the base side and the miniature side. And I'm just touching up his loincloth a little bit, the part that comes up over his tail. And some highlights. See a couple more of those medallions that got brought up to steel. And then I think here in a moment you're going to see me bust out with a razor, and I'm going to try to take care of part of the seam line. or the mold line I should say, that's on that tail. It was just sticking up too much. So I shaved it back down, which means I'll need to go back over his tail later and highlight it again. And there we go, using an X-Acto knife. Filming at this angle is really hard to do it where you could see what I was doing, but I'm not going in and slicing the mold line. I'm actually just kind of holding the blade perpendicular to it and then scraping and just kind of working my way down to where I see it starts taking off a little bit of the primer flush with the tail. It's kind of a good indication that you've gotten rid of the mold line. There's still some of it there towards the end of his tail, but I'm not as worried about that. I don't think it's quite as prominent. It doesn't really detract from the model as much as that higher mold line did there towards the base of his tail. And here there's a ring underneath that bone section of the glaive, and I'm just hitting that with some purple too. Now it has studs on it, and if you look very closely to his wrist there on the hand that's holding the glaive, he has some kind of bracelet on that's not present on his other hand, or part of his bracer, part of his armor. I'm going to do the same with it. It's going to match that ring around the base there of the bone part of the glaive. It's going to be purple, which you see me painting that bracelet now, and then I'm going to go back and I'm probably going to do the studs in a silver. Excuse me. My allergies are flaring up. Doesn't happen very often, but there you go. I'm just painting some more trim. Again, hitting it with that hex lichen. Something I didn't show earlier. The air color is very thin paint, which is great, but because I was afraid that my initial coating over the armor was still going to allow a lot of the metal to shine through, I actually hit it with Imperial Blue from the Game Air Vallejo line. And the Imperial Blue is a very, very deep blue, much like the Hex Lichen is a very, very deep purple. But what that helped do is that initial coat just helped knock out some of the armor color, and then putting the purple over it, you'll still get a good purple tint. It'll just be a little more shifted towards the blue part of the spectrum and purple, but it just helped ensure coverage. But with this part of the trim, like on his bracers, I don't think I worried about it. I just think I double coated the Hex Lichen before I started going in with some of the highlights. But I used that Imperial Purple down on the thigh part of his armor. Again, just kind of darken it up a little bit before throwing down the purple. Thanks very much, guys. Bark on, puppies.